To direct your attention to something that's worth your time. It's a new opinion piece written in The Federalist by David Harsanyi. Harsanyi reminds Americans to not surrender to the do-somethingism on guns. Law-abiding Americans have no obligation to take ownership of a madman's actions. Harsanyi specifically calls out Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, an expert on somethingism. Murphy is dismissing, what's telling here, I think, is how Murphy is dismissing the importance of the national mental health crisis plaguing this country. Shouldn't this be addressed as one of the root causes of these mass shootings? Not if you ask Chris Murphy. And as usual, Democrats like Murphy and Beto O'Rourke, well, they have to use naughty words to make their point. Here's Murphy on the floor of the U.S. Senate.
Why are you here? If not to solve a problem as existential as this.
Now, he often talks about H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446. These are the bills that Democrats reference in times of tragedy like this. Harsanyi points out this about both of those. Chuck Schumer planned to introduce H.R. 8, an expanded background check bill, and H.R. 1446, a bill that would close the alleged Charleston loophole before he realized it wouldn't be politically expedient. Now, he says alleged because Dylann Roof, who murdered 9 black churchgoers in Charleston in 2015, had a clean background check, not because of any loophole, but because local prosecutors there in South Carolina, failed to respond to the FBI's request for more information about the case. And this example is human error or maybe even negligence. Now, in order for expanded background checks to work, you have to have competent people doing the background checks. The tragedy is that the solutions always seem so simple in hindsight. In Uvalde, it was making sure the back door of that school was locked. Now, we know from experience how to keep kids safe. A single point of entry in schools, and at least one armed guard there at that point of entry. That's what they do at Manatee's School for the Arts in Palmetto, Florida. Here's a 2018 article from the Sarasota Herald-Tribune profiling the school's guardian. His name is Harold Verdercia. He is an infantryman from the U.S. Army. He completed tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's been shot at, and he's had to fire back. Also, Ben Shapiro tweeting that in the Jewish community, we have been doing this for literally decades at this point. Armed security guards, protocols on locked exterior doors, lockdown procedures and mechanisms for classrooms, fenced campuses are commonplace and well accepted. So let's talk about what we can do to actually keep these places safe and welcome in retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel West, great to see you again.
Good to be with you, John. Thank you. And you're just spot on in your assessment and that monologue you just did.
Well, I wish I could take more credit for it. I mean, it's, David Harsanyi and some of these other guys, and this is the stuff, this is not me saying this stuff. The evidence is out there. We know this from Parkland. We know this in Newtown, what they do to keep the kids safe there. But it's not politically expedient for Democrats to talk about it, is it?
Oh, of course not, because the whole point is about undermining the Second Amendment. And as Rahm Emanuel say, never let a good crisis go to waste. But think about the hypocrisy. How many millions of dollars do we spend on security at sports and entertainment venues? How many millions of dollars were spent to make sure that the Hollywood A-listers were safe at the Academy Awards? But yet you don't see that when it comes to protecting our schools. It's very simple, the things that we can do to harden our schools. As a matter of fact, we have a sheriff here in Bosque County, Texas, that is already looking at reinstating a school marshal program. And that's exactly what we should have. You just highlighted the veteran from the Army who is doing that type of duty and responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can be Chris Murphy and claim to want to keep kids safe in school, but also support this law that wants to defund the police, take school officers out of the schools, the resource officers. And it's not just Chris Murphy, it's Elizabeth Warren, it's Ilhan Omar and others as well. They all support that.
Well, I find it a little bit disingenuous that the party that wants to make sure that we can murder unborn babies in the womb by dismemberment all the way up to the time of their birth is really concerned about the safety of our children. And we're supposed to have the NRA convention here in Houston starting today, and Black Lives Matter wants to show up and protest it, saying that the NRA has blood on its hands. Well, the second largest facility for murdering unborn babies in the world is located in Houston, Texas. That's the Planned Parenthood headquarters there. And Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, well, guess what? She was a white supremacist, a racist, referred to blacks as undesirables and weeds. That is an organization that has blood on their hands of our children every single day. But you don't hear anyone on the left speaking out about them.
much money Planned Parenthood plans to spend in those midterm elections, Lieutenant Colonel West. Wanted to ask you here, too, well, you know, we're mourning the loss of 19 children, 2 teachers, hearing about heroics. You have President Biden out yesterday. What is he doing? He's signing an executive order 2 years following the death of George Floyd. And we want to get your reaction, sharing his thoughts here, he says, about the Second Amendment. This is the president yesterday.
Second Amendment's not absolute. When it was passed, you couldn't own a cannon. You couldn't own certain kinds of weapons. It's just always been limitations. The idea that an 18-year-old can walk into a store and buy weapons of war designed and marketed to kill is, I think, just wrong. It just violates common sense.
Not absolute. Lieutenant Colonel West, your reaction to the president?
You know, several generations in my family have sworn an oath to the Constitution to support and defend it, and we deploy it into combat zones. Every single Bill of Right in every single amendment in the Constitution is absolute. And that's the big concern that we have. If the Second Amendment is not absolute, then what about the First? What about the Fourth? What about the Ninth and 10th Amendments? All of these things in the Constitution, nothing about the Constitution to the left is sacrosanct, because they believe that it's their ideological agenda that should be above every single thing, and to include the rule of law. So I am very disturbed that this is a president that supposedly took an oath to uphold the Constitution is now saying that one of the enumerated rights in the Constitution is not absolute.
Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, great to see you as always. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless y'all.
Thank you.